What if two of the world's most sanctioned nations were quietly rewriting the rules of global trade and even the balance of military power? What if a major oil producer, cut off from Western finance, found a way to trade crude for advanced defense systems? And what if that deal, hidden behind opaque shipping routes and shadow banks, linked Tehran and Beijing at the very moment the United Nations was trying to clamp down again? Today, we investigate the mounting evidence and the unanswered questions behind headlines suggesting a secret Iran-China oil for weapons deal. Is this real? Is it legal? And why does it matter for the United States, Europe, and the wider Middle East? Iran and China have long shared an interest in defying US-led sanctions. Iran has energy, but faces restrictions on selling it internationally. China has vast industrial capacity, capital, and defense technology, but wants secure energy at competitive prices and a stable partner in the Gulf. Their partnership deepened in March 2021 with the signing of a 25-year comprehensive strategic agreement. The public version highlights investment in oil, gas, infrastructure, and transport corridors, but leaked drafts, never officially confirmed, suggested preferential pricing for Chinese purchases of Iranian oil, and even a possible presence of Chinese security personnel to protect Chinese projects inside Iran. That alone was enough to alarm Washington and its allies. But as new UN sanctions snapped back in late 2025, a bigger question emerged. Had the partnership quietly evolved into something far more strategic, an oil for weapons bargain? To understand the stakes, we have to revisit the 2015 nuclear agreement known as the JCPOA. That deal offered Iran sanctions relief in return for strict limits on its nuclear activities, but the US withdrew in 2018, reimposing unilateral sanctions. Then, in September 2025, the European powers, Britain, France, and Germany, triggered what is called the snapback mechanism under UN Security Council Resolution 2231. This reinstated global restrictions on Iran's nuclear, missile, and certain arms-related activities. The United Nations Security Council rejected last-minute attempts by Russia and China to delay the move. As a result, many international companies pulled back from doing business with Iran again. For Tehran, the renewed squeeze on oil sales and access to hard currency was a blow. For Beijing, whose Belt and Road plans need Middle East energy and stability, it was both a challenge and an opportunity to secure oil at a discount while deepening its strategic footprint in the Gulf. Officially, US sanctions ban most purchases of Iranian oil, yet Iran continues to export over 1 million barrels a day, much of it destined for China. How? Investigators point to a web of ghost fleet tankers, vessels that switch flags, change names, disable tracking transponders, and conduct ship-to-ship transfers on the high seas to disguise the origin of their cargo. On the Iranian side, a state-controlled enterprise called Seper Energy Jahannama Pars, founded in 2022, has been singled out by US officials as being tied to the Ministry of Defense and Armed Forces logistics. Washington argues that Seper's oil sales directly fund Iran's military apparatus. In May 2025, the US Treasury imposed fresh sanctions on a network of shipping companies allegedly carrying Iranian crude to Chinese refiners. The Wall Street Journal later revealed that payments often avoid the international banking system altogether. Instead, a little-known Chinese conduit called Chuxin channels the value of the oil into credits that are then used to pay Chinese contractors building roads, power plants, or ports in Iran, all underwritten by the state export insurer Sinosure. This barter-like system blurs the line between commercial trade and strategic finance, because the very same opaque network that moves oil revenue around sanctions could, in theory, be used to settle other transactions, including military acquisitions. US officials say the structure deprives Washington of the leverage it seeks. When oil revenues never touch the global dollar system, sanctions become harder to enforce. For Beijing, the model reduces direct exposure of its banks to secondary sanctions, while keeping Iranian oil flowing to its refiners at a discount. Analysts note that Iran's need for modern air defense systems, drones, and missile components coincides with China's capacity to supply such items, officially for civilian use or via intermediaries to avoid detection. A persistent claim in defense circles is that Iran has recently obtained China's HQ-9B long-range surface-to-air missile batteries, though neither government has confirmed it. Skeptics warn that the evidence remains circumstantial, often drawn from commercial satellite imagery or regional intelligence leaks. Still, the presence of an established barter-like payment route strengthens suspicions that oil could be exchanged, at least in part, for defense equipment. China has historically been cautious about overt arms sales to Iran, mindful of US scrutiny and of its own energy interests with Gulf Arab states. Yet there is a long history of lower-level defense collaboration, from missile technology in the 1980s and 1990s to drone components more recently. Iran's defense posture today relies on a mix of indigenous production and foreign inputs, often acquired through covert channels. Reports in regional military journals suggest that the HQ-9B, if deployed in Iran, could offer a significant upgrade to its air defense envelope, extending coverage against high-altitude aircraft or missiles to over 200 kilometers. Such a system could deter or complicate any potential Israeli or US airstrikes on Iranian nuclear sites. However, even experts who believe some transfers have occurred stress that there is no public proof of a massive formal oil-for-strike weapons agreement. Beijing continues to emphasize diplomacy and stability in the Gulf and officially denies violating UN arms restrictions. That tension between evidence of growing defense ties and the lack of verified contracts is at the heart of the current debate. So, how should we interpret the evidence? One school of thought sees a de facto barter system. Iranian oil offsets the cost of Chinese-supplied equipment, whether classified as military, dual use, or infrastructure. A second, more cautious reading argues that Beijing limits its help to air defense, cyber, or surveillance technology, items that can be justified as defensive or civilian. A third view holds that there is no true arms for oil pact at all, rather a web of parallel commercial ties that creates a misleading appearance of strategic military exchange. What's clear is that both nations benefit from keeping details opaque. Iran gains a lifeline for revenues and access to technology while under pressure. China secures discounted energy and influence in a pivotal region without openly defying global rules. For the West, this opacity itself is the problem. Enforcement agencies cannot easily distinguish where infrastructure investment ends and weapons support begins. That uncertainty fuels speculation and headlines about a secret deal whose reality remains contested.